All right, I'm going to test this clicker here real quick and just make sure that works. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, cool. So I started my career about 25 years ago, and a lot of people are like, what's event data? 25 years ago, it was like modifying a Cisco PIX. I don't even know that Cisco had bought PIX yet, but it was changing this syslog line. And I never knew what that meant. I was just a smart hands IT guy from IBM, and 20 years later, 10 years later from that, syslog became a big part of my life. And essentially, event data can look anything like logs to metrics to traces. And Axiom, today I'm going to talk about Axiom and something that's kind of revolutionary in terms of like leveraging cloud native technologies for ingesting data that we see being really disruptive. And one of the main points that I kind of talk through here is that there's so many challenges with it. To say that there's like 7 evil X's, if we're using the Scott Pilgrim analogy here. Some of the text on here is not quite what it should be, but I'll talk through it. And essentially, there's challenges, right, with like retention, challenges around being able to search data over long periods of time, being able to store that data and stay within, maybe one of the evil X's could be like your license limitations within Splunk, right? So entire products have been created or developed around this, right? So that you could like filter and sample and still like operate your business without being completely distracted by what we like to call data gymnastics, right? So you'll see things like cold storage and frozen and rehydration and things of that nature, which are really just saying like restoring your data so that you can actually do something with it. And so Axiom kind of helps unlock some of those things. And so we all know data's growing. You've heard this before. Every IoT device is generating more data. I don't have to bore you with like all of the places that it comes from. But one of the biggest things is that when we're eliminating entire realms of data, and we're having to decide up front that firewall data isn't as important as sysmon data or EDR data or data coming from my ERP system or authentication logs. Like, we have to sit down and have these key decisions. And from my perspective, if we were able to commoditize search and analysis like Amazon commoditized online storage, then we don't have to think that way. We don't have to think on the basis of like scarcity. We don't have to have licensing models that are events per second or per device or anything like that. It can still be based just like S3 is basing it, right? It's a consumption model. It's just like you pay for your electricity. It's just like you pay for your gas in your car or the wattage in your EV, right? It's all consumption based, but if we could lower the bar on the complexity of that so that you can always have your data, we can be more efficient in our businesses and be less disruptive to our businesses, whether it's making widgets or creating software. So I like to talk about essentially the scarcity kind of component that is there. I think Taylor Swift says, Band-Aids don't fix bullet holes. You'll see that sometimes products are generated to make life easier in terms of routing, shaping data, and pivoting data. And so Axiom has kind of come up with a model where you can send all of your data to Axiom. It's searchable. It's on like a per terabyte or tens of terabyte license model that's affordable. It doesn't go up like at an angle. It goes up like 10 terabyte bucket price that ends up saving you anywhere from like 60 to, in some cases, we had one Splunk migration that was like 90%. We're not a full-on SIM replacement. We're super new, but you can get insights out of your data that you need because we have a complex query language that's really functional. And so how did these guys do this, right? They took a cloud-native approach and said, let's make all of the storage be S3. Out of the gate, that makes things really easy. We're not using spindles. We're not using expensive flash arrays or SSD type storage that makes your searches faster because the overrunning overhead of searching data and search heads cost money. They took the search component and said, let's get rid of indexes and let's add lambdas. So lambdas are serverless functions, and just based on the amount of time it takes for you to put a query together and you to submit that query, we're able to basically right size how many compute resources you need for that specific query at that moment in time. Your dashboards that are running, your monitors or alerts that are running, they're all queries in Axiom, and they're all based on kind of a piped messaging language that is like Custo. And so we like to say Custo is essentially if Splunk were able to write a version 2 of SPL, it's more extensive. It's kind of a hybrid between like SQL and Lucene, if anybody knows Elastic or Elasticsearch. It makes searching and analyzing your data really easy. We have a proprietary compression algorithm that drops your data into S3. And so we're seeing somewhere between 34 and 37x on log data. And what's super impressive, we're about to release metrics. Traces have been out for a while. That's not really in the security space, but it's worth mentioning as some of the data looks very similar, like a sysmon or a sysdig type of data format. We're getting like 95x compression on some of that data. So that makes it really easy for us to have that data searchable in those lambdas. Those lambdas don't run as long, and that translates back to an overall cost component for us that makes reimagining and being able to have all of that data available a reality. There's no message queue. There's no coordination. So a lot of these systems, like an Elasticsearch cluster, you'll see, and I'm not hating on Elasticsearch, it changed the game in people being able to get more insights out of their data. But once that cluster starts getting into the 10 to 20 terabytes per day, you're adding a message queue in front of that, like Kafka or Redis, right? And these are all, back to the Taylor Swift analogy earlier, components that are just kind of allowing that technology to breathe a little bit while the data is being ingested. And so these guys have rethought that and said, actually, you could do that with an HTTP smart router. When the packet's coming in, we know a few things about that data, so we can place it in the compressed format. We can build some cache binary objects so that the searches are quick and fast. That allows us to basically offer it at a price point that everybody is kind of amazed at. So a lot of things come about. We're a newer company, security requirements, right? So we have our SOC 2, Type 2. Our ISO 27001 is just about 2.5 months around the corner. We're hosted in the cloud here in the US. We have a region in the EU. We keep adding regions as we add clients, as it only makes sense. I'll talk a little bit about kind of the investment model. We've taken on venture capital, but I believe the co-founders are building this in a model where it's not built to just expand so far that it could fail because you have so much operationally that's existing. We have advanced role-based access control from the enterprise perspective. Single sign-on is a component that exists in all areas of the product. If you want to add some of the more feature intense like SAML components, we use a third party to kind of broker that. That comes at a cost, so we add that in our enterprise license. We have about 12 to 15,000. It's kind of hard to keep track as we have like thousands being added. After each conference that we attend, Jason and I went to Monitorama. I think we had 2,500 what we call like self-service clients. Each of them basically is like trialing Axiom for like 5 terabytes a month with 90 days retention, and it's costing them $25. And that's basically kind of a sales strategy, but it also is unlocking a lot for these clients that don't have those huge demands. So they're not enterprises. They don't need 365. They don't need advanced RBAC. They don't need some of those things. They're software developers working on building their product. And we're seeing a a nice conversion rate there when they get to the advanced tier and they need additional additional controls. We're able to help them with that. Here's a little bit about SAFE. And Neil, Jason Rosensteel here in the front is on to lead sales. You'll see some of our clients over there on the right. Hydro is one that's like a Peloton, but it's a rowing machine that's based on water. I helped them with a Splunk conversion that allowed them to unlock for their development team. They basically were running into issues where their software developers couldn't gain insights into their data without their Splunk instance timing out. And that was great to go through. The company is backed by Nat Friedman, who's the founder of GitHub, as well as Xamarin Insights. So Xamarin Insights was like back in the day of mobile devices when they launched. All of the tracing and metrics challenges that came with collecting all of that data in a relatively new time. SAFE and Neil were the ones that built that platform. And so they took that ecosystem and said, hey, I think we can do this with logs, metrics, and traces. So if kind of biggest takeaway I'd like to mention here is that there's a volumetric data use case that Axiom can help unlock for you guys. If you've got firewalls and you're making firewalls, or your VPC flow logs, or Sysmon or WAF, like all of these volumetric data sources, and you're making compromises with your current SIEM or your current log solution, you could look at Axiom and still unlock that for relatively short cost savings, and bifurcate that data back into your SIEM for sampling if you still like that and you still have operational elements like built around that. And I would say it's about the next like 6 to 9 months we'll start adding more SIEM-like functionality and capabilities. But for right now, on the operational side of that, we're able to unlock those things. But we're around the whole conference and would love to answer any questions that anybody has during the Q&A session. Thank you.